Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Data Playbook. Now that we have Week 12 kicked off with Thursday Night Football, we're going to look into the Sunday day games one by one. So if this is not the pregame of the two teams that you're looking for, go look for the other video that should be on the channel. But otherwise, let's get into this one. Here we have the Colts going to Kansas City, where Kansas City is favored on the money line with a spread of 3.5 and a total line of 50.5. And then here's your team averages, as well as looking at the rankings. You have the Colts with some really good rankings over here, especially on offense, almost a top 3 team right here, with their worst being a passing rank of 3 and maybe the tight end ranking of 7, but otherwise a rushing rank of 2 and a scoring rank of 1. And then on defense, they're also pretty good, other than this allowed passing rank of 26. But an allowed scoring rank of 9 and an allowed rushing rank of 5 are still pretty good. For Kansas City, you also have a pretty good offense with a scoring rank of 9, a passing rank of 4, and about average rushing rank of 16. Also really good with the tight end, as we know with Kelsey. And then defensively, they're also really good with the passing rank. And then defensively, they're also top 3rd in the league with an allowed passing rank of 5, an allowed rushing rank of 9, and an allowed scoring rank of 4. Looking at how the quarterbacks stack up, you have Daniel Jones and Patrick Mahomes, with Jones averaging 19.3 fantasy points per game, and Mahomes averaging about 22 fantasy points per game. Daniel Jones has 7 interceptions, with 3 fumbles lost due to sacks, and Mahomes has 6 interceptions, with no other turnovers. And then everything's switched over to their averages, and looking at their share, you get 16.2% of the team's rushing carry share from Daniel Jones, using that average of 4 carries per game. Over here it's cut off, unfortunately, but it is a little smaller, so it might be about 10%. But of course, we can look at that with the running backs. And then over here with Mahomes, you get about 20% of the team's rushing carry share, with about 4.8 average carries per game. And that comes out to be 27.4% of the team's rushing yard share at 28.8 average rushing yards per game. For your running backs in this game, you have Jonathan Taylor and Kareem Hunt. For Jonathan Taylor, you get 27.4 fantasy points per game on average, and Kareem Hunt gets about 9.4. Between the two players, there's been no turnovers actually given up. And with everything switched over to their averages, we'll look at their share, with Jonathan Taylor getting 76.5% of the team's total rushing carry share, and 84.5% of the team's rushing yard share, easily carrying the most of anybody else and not even giving much to the backup. That's much different than Kansas City over here, where Kareem Hunt gets about 35.8% of the team's total carries and about 33.6% of the team's total rushing yards. He shares that heavily, of course, with Isaiah Pacheco, but also about like a quarter of it with Mahomes. Moving into the receiving game, you have Michael Pittman and Rashid Rice as your number 1 receivers. Pittman averaging 15 fantasy points per game, and Rice averaging 19.3. With no turnovers, we'll just look at their averages. And then their share, with Pittman getting 26% of the team's target share and 24.6% of the team's total receiving yard share. It's interesting with Indianapolis, it looks pretty spread out. That's very close with what looks like Tyler Warren, but he still is the number 1 target share on the team. However, he doesn't have quite the number 1 receiving yards on the team. That one will go to Tyler Warren, as we'll see later. Rashid Rice right now has about 10.3% of the team's target share and about 9.7% of the team's receiving yard share. Once again, that's because he's missed many weeks here, so he's still building up his numbers, even though he had kind of a bad week last week. And then for the number 2 receivers, you have Alex Pierce and Xavier Worthy, with Pierce getting an average of 11.6 fantasy points per game, and Worthy at about 8.5. And again, with these two, there's no turnovers, so we'll look at those averages and target share, with Alex Pierce at 19.3% of the team's target share and 24.8% of the team's receiving yard share. That does put him even above Michael Pittman a little bit for the receiving yard share, but about the 3rd highest in his target share. For Xavier Worthy, he's at 13.2% of the team's target share and 10.8% of the team's receiving yard share. And then we have our tight ends with Tyler Warren and Travis Kelsey. Warren averaging 13.6 fantasy points per game, and Travis Kelsey averaging 13.9. Neither player has any turnovers, so here's your season averages. And then your target share down here with Warren is at 24.9% of the team's total target share, which is 2nd highest as we mentioned before with Pittman. But then his receiving yards are at 26.2% of the team's total receiving share, making him the highest of anybody on the team. And with Travis Kelsey, you have something kind of similar, where he gets about 19.4% of the team's total target share. However, that is the largest of anybody else on the team. And over here with 24.2% of the team's total receiving yard share, which is a quarter and much larger than anybody else at the moment. So there's all the data in this game. This could be an interesting matchup, especially with Kansas City having a really good defense against a really good offense. The offense is probably a little better than the defense by the numbers. However, the big gap that you have here is that Kansas City has this passing rank of 4 against an allowed passing rank of 26. So Kansas City could really pass the ball around, it seems like, on Indianapolis if they really need. So that might be the weakness here for the Colts. However, it does look like the scoring rank's a little better for the Colts. But in my opinion, you have Kansas City at home with a better defense overall, so they probably will outscore the Colts in the end. And there's the data for that pregame review. I hope you found it interesting and useful. And if you did, leave a like and subscribe. And leave a comment on what else you might want to see in the future. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you for the next one.